Welcome in. It is another edition of our NFL previews here for the 2025 season on Sports by the Book, live from the South Point as always. Jeff Parles, Alex White, and now we give you the Las Vegas perspective of Miami Dolphins here going into the year. Alex, again, a disappointing year ago for the Fins. They end up 8-9. They end up second in the AFC East, but when New England and the Jets were both bottom feeders a year ago, Miami was expected to do more. They missed the playoffs. And boy, it does not look much prettier for the Miami Dolphins after a tumultuous offseason for the Fins in the AFC East. And they have fallen behind New England in the perspective of the bookmakers as their win total, the Dolphins, is 8, and they're all the way up to plus 180 to make the postseason, which for the better, if you like the Dolphins to make the playoffs, it's the best number you could have gotten the whole McDaniel era going into a season to make the postseason.
Well, of course, like you said, a big fall off last year after making the playoffs 2 years in a row. Felt like a lot of people were talking about Tua and company kind of making that push to be contenders. And then now it's just them trying to stay about 500. And I think that is right where they are going to be. Not a whole lot of expectations, kind of a lot of drama that's come with Tyreek Hill and throughout the offseason and even during the season. So we'll see what can happen. I will say they did manage to stabilize the ship, even with Tua missing 6 games last year. And still, like you said, we're second in this division, but a lot of expectations for New England, a new look in New York. So we'll see. But I think that the bookmakers have it just about right here.
So 8, the win total. Let's go over to the schedule again. Dolphins almost 7-1 to win the division. It's not happening. When we get to the Buffalo preview, Buffalo's schedule is one of the greatest draws I've ever seen for a high end team. So it's going to be very difficult for anyone to catch the Bills this year, just because Buffalo might win 14, 15 games with their schedule if Josh Allen stays upright. Here you go. Go ahead, Alex.
To your point, I mean, they might not even be your best AFC team, but really the draw looks so good.
So good.
And they have just enough with Josh Allen that I think it should be pretty easy for them.
So for Miami, this team, you look at the schedule and you look at the first 4 games, you see 3 divisional opponents, including getting 2 of those games at home, which is an advantage early in the season to get the Jets and the Patriots early in South Beach while it's still insanely humid and insanely hot. Now, granted, the Northeast summer this year has been brutal with humidity, so may not be quite the advantage as it usually has been for those teams, for Miami against those Northeast teams coming south early in the year. Also, that Jet game is a Monday night game, so won't be middle of the afternoon insane heat as you would expected, even though it's the end of September. But Alex, I don't want to overreact to just 4 games on the schedule. But Miami, if they are going to stay afloat and not implode, they have to find a way to start at least 500 in those first 4 games. They have to go 500, and they realistically have to win the 2 divisional home games. If they dump the Indy game, it doesn't look great, but all right, you can get away with it. They're going to be a touchdown at least as an underdog in Buffalo, so whatever, if you somehow pull that upset, but we know Miami does not play the Bills well in this era. Yeah. But they have to find a way to get those first 2 home divisional games. If they don't get both and they start with 1-3, or God forbid they start 0-4, Mike McDaniel to be the first coach fired looks like a really good bet to me, because this is an unstable situation to begin with, where you have a quarterback with a horrible injury history, where, by the way, Miami is going into the season with Zach Wilson as their backup quarterback. I'm sorry that with 2, and we saw this last year where they went in with Skylar Thompson as the backup. They had to go to get Tyler Huntley off Cleveland's practice squad, and then it cost them in the end. Going into the year with a guy with such a bad injury history as your starter, and having a guy who is not an NFL starter as your backup, you're asking for problems if you're Miami, if Tua gets hurt again. Tyreek doesn't seem like he wants to be there. They didn't improve the defense enough after a bad defensive second half. This has bottom out potential, especially if those first 4 games do not go at least 500, Alex.
I would take it even farther. I was looking at those first 6. I think they need to go 500 there, and they can. I do think they can go 3-3. I even have a case scenario where they go 5-1. I think they could do it. I think some of those teams are beatable early on, and then I think that there's a really tough stretch there in the middle. So I'm with you. I think they need to get off to a hot start. From what we have seen from the Miami Dolphins and Tua, they are capable of doing that. And we've seen them start very hot, and then people start talking about Super Bowl and all this stuff, and then it kind of, the bottom falls out. I am very concerned about their defense. I thought their defense was very good, and I brought up how they won games without Tua. Well, that was mostly because of their defense. They're ranking 4th total defense last year, 9th in passing, 9th in rushing, and they have a ton of turnover, just 6 returners. I don't think they did a great job in filling in those gaps. I think their defense is going to fall off, and it's going to put way more pressure on Tua and some of these new weapons, and they're kind of doing something different with running back, so that makes me a little bit worried as well. But I still think Waddle and Tyreek Hill are 2 of the best wide receivers. Definitely 1-2 punch there for him. But yeah, it could go a lot of different ways. That is why I actually have the Dolphins winning 9 games looking through their schedule, but that really scares me. I wouldn't put my money there for the over because anything could happen.
I think Miami's an under team this year, Alex, at 8 -130. And again, you look at this defense too. They did not improve the defense enough this offseason. He had a secondary's totally new look. Of course, Jalen Ramsey gets shipped off to Pittsburgh, and Minka Fitzpatrick comes back for his second tenure in Miami. Jack Jones, is a guy who's been in and out of rosters as well. Milofanu comes over from Detroit as well at the safety position, but they did not improve the defense enough. Again, I understand Chubb is coming off a significant injury, so maybe we'll see a version that is still close to what Bradley Chubb was pre-injury, but I just don't see it, especially with Jalen Phillips coming off a major injury as well. You've guys coming off major injuries. You have a defense that I don't think was improved enough this offseason. I think this could be a bottom tier defense in this league, which then puts the heat on Tua in the offense. And then if Tua, again, there's just too many things that can, when you're looking at a team, you look for things that can go right and things that can go wrong. The list of what can go wrong for Miami is significantly longer than what can go right for this team. This is, Alex, I wouldn't be shocked if this is a shocking bottom out from Miami, where this is McDaniel, where, all right, you mentioned the first 6 games. Let's say they start 1-5 and you go into that Cleveland game. Oh. And it's, all right, well, playing a team that might be 0-6 at this point, a team that could be playing a rookie quarterback if it gets off bad enough in Cleveland, whether it's Shador or Dylan Gabriel or Flacco or Pickett or whoever else, and Cleveland get off to a bad start. You lose that game and you go into Atlanta, that could be lights out for Mike McDaniel if it's a bad enough start. So Miami is, of all the teams in the AFC that are not obvious, like Cleveland or again, a projected last place team like the Jets or the Raiders or any of those mediocre teams in the AFC South, Miami's the one that I think could really bottom out. And this could be like 4-13 bad, 5-12 bad for Miami. I like them under. I think 7-10, 6-11 makes a heck of a lot of sense here for the Finns. And then Mike McDaniel's out of a job and they're hiring, and Chris Greer should be out of a job as well, the GM. And then this is a whole new regime in Miami next year with questions about, hey, do we go forward with Tua, even though they gave him a big contract?
I will just say, looking at that schedule, I do think it is pretty favorable in the sense that they cross over with the AFC North and, some question marks with the Bengals, what they were doing defensively, the Browns. You mentioned it with the quarterbacks. And then the NFC South, who I am not high on at all. Of course, the Bucs should be pretty stabilized like they were the last few years. But the Falcons, Panthers, and Saints, still a lot of question marks there. So I think just when penciling the wins, they could have wins that they should be able to get there. But then, of course, there's a lot of question marks with this team as well. So preseason power rating, they're pretty average right there with a lot of the teams they will be facing. But that's why I wouldn't touch it, because not a whole lot of faith there.
It's just a team where the defense, not enough was done. And Tua scares me, Alex. Tua just scares me so much. And now, look, I don't think the debate over Tua of how good he is, I think it's a lot of nonsense personally, where, all right, we know what Tua Tagovailoa is at this point. He's somewhere from about the 18th to the 11th best quarterback, depending on how he's playing at the current moment. And the bigger concern for me is how can you go into a year where you have faith that he plays more than 10 games, 11 games? Only done the whole season once in his career, horrible concussion history as it is. I just don't see how you can reliably say, hey, Tua Tagovailoa is going to play 14 out of the 17 games. And if that's the case, how are you going into the year with Zach Wilson as your backup quarterback? You need to be – there are teams that need to spend on backup quarterbacks. This is the team that if I was running the Dolphins, all right, you know what? I'm going into Tua with my number one quarterback. All right, fine. If you think he's that good, no problem. But I better have a Jacoby Brissett behind him. I better have someone who was like Ryan Fitzpatrick at the beginning of Tua's career behind him. I better have someone that I know if I plop in there, if Tua gets hurt, which again, it's probably going to happen more likely than not, that I can go in there and he can play whoever it may be, Brissett or Tyrod Taylor, someone in that vein, and he can go out and it's not that big of a drop. And last year, it was a significant drop. And this year, if Zach Wilson has to play multiple games, it will be a significant drop. So I just hated that from Miami's offseason, where you needed to go in and bring in a real backup quarterback, the Tua Tagovailoa, and you brought in Zach Wilson. That's not good enough. That's not good enough.
I will say I'm very intrigued to see what they do with their running game that really struggled last year. Of course, Mostert goes to Las Vegas. They get Alexander Madison. So Achane will be the number one guy, but they really struggled to get the run game going, which put a lot of pressure on Tua and the weapons, and it seemed like they were pretty easy to defend there. So I do like the pickup with Ollie Gordon. We'll see how he does. But yeah, so a lot of question marks. Again, I do think they had a very good defense last year, and second half not as good, but they really stabilized and helped them get as many wins as they did and finish 8-9. And now they lose a lot of guys that they don't fill in those gaps. So a lot of question marks here. Betting wise, I would not take them for championship, conference, or division. That's for sure. Tyreek Hill, down year for him last year. Could you expect a bounce back this year?
You know, I've been very tame on Tyreek Hill so far in this episode. I think Tyreek Hill's days as an elite wide receiver in this league are done. He is still a good wide receiver, but he should not be considered a guy that is going to go out there and be in the same vein as any of those guys at the top of the list. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Lamb, Neighbors, Collins, all better than him. Brian Thomas Jr. last year was much better than him. I'd even go to the right side of that screen, and Marv Jr. should be better this year. A.J. Brown's better. Garrett Wilson's better. There are a lot of guys who are better players at this point than Tyreek Hill. Look, the Chiefs are completely justified in what they did all the way through. They won multiple Super Bowls without him. They may win another Super Bowl without him, and they probably will win another Super Bowl or two without him, whether it's this year or a few years down the line. But Tyreek Hill is not the same guy anymore. And especially if he's not going to be happy down there, forget it. Again, all the recipes, the ingredients for the recipe of this being a total bottom outer there. All the ingredients. It's just a matter of will the Dolphins' easy-looking schedule save them? Right. That's really the big question. They do not, again, we don't know what the teams are going to end up being. This schedule could end up being really difficult when it's all said and done. The NFC South could surprise. The Jets and the Patriots could be borderline playoff teams, and the schedule then all of a sudden looks pretty hard. Yep. But in the end, Alex, this is team bottom out in the AFC. There's not really a great NFC candidate for bottom out, but this is the AFC candidate that makes the most sense, where we could look up in the middle of December and it's like, oh, Miami is a 10-point underdog at home to Tampa in week 17. And it makes sense to us. Like something like that could happen, Alex, and it wouldn't shock me.
No, I agree with that. But then this is a team that also wins very close games, and
Sure.
we could, like you said, they could take advantage, and we could find them just being 500 like always and kind of just skating along. But yeah, nothing really definite to want to jump in for betting purposes, though.
Yeah, I'll just take under 8. If you can find an 8.5 that's not horrendously juiced, I wouldn't mind that either, just to eliminate the push. But also, too, if they get out 2-0 and that win total balloons to 10, that would be the time. That would be the time. If they, and again, Colt game is a flip. It's a flip.
Yeah.
Let's be real. That's a flip. Week 2, it's a flip. Miami be favored at home against New England. So those are very possible. They could get out to a really good start, but they don't get out to the really good start. The bottom out is very much in play for the Dolphins. All right. That's what we got for you with the Fins here today. We got more previews coming your way throughout the month of August. So be on the lookout here as we get closer to week 1 in Philadelphia with the Eagles and the Cowboys, or week 1 in Indianapolis for these Miami Dolphins. So be on the lookout here on Sports by the Book. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Same at South Point Studio as well. We are live, Alex and I, on the Sports by the Book channel on YouTube, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern. The best in sports betting every single day. So be on the lookout for that. She's Alex White. I'm Jeff Parles. We'll see you next time on the NFL Previews here for the 2025 season here at Sports by the Book at the South Point Studio.